Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Pros and Cons of Cloud Content Services, an evaluation criteria that will make both business users and IT quite happy. My name is Teresa Resick. I'm the Director of Market Intelligence Programs here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's webinar. And with me today are AIIM's President, Peggy Winton, and joining from OpenText is John Shoop. OpenText is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them very much for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And as we're getting started here, I just want to offer a few tips for participating in today's webinar. By joining our event live, you can resize the different windows that are in front of you. I do ask that you open up the group chat, and that's in the list of icons across the bottom of your screen. And that way you can message with each other and with us here at AIIM. And do ask throughout our time today, and appreciate if you would use the Q&A feature for that. And we'll do our best to get to all of them later in the webcast, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to take those questions. Ask that you look to the resources section to the right of the slide area to download the links that we have there for you. There's some really cool reading, a good case study, and just some good information in there. So I encourage you to take advantage of those resources that we have. And later, please take the survey, and I greatly value your feedback on how we did today. And so that link to the survey is also in the bottom, and at the very end it will open up for you on your computer as well. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the speakers we have with us today. And first, to introduce Peggy Winton. And with over 30 years of program, product, and business development experience, Peggy is responsible for the strategic, technical, and business direction of AIIM. Peggy believes that marketing and technology are converging and moving to the forefront of the business in order to deliver the ultimate customer experience. With this, businesses need to adapt to a world that has shifted from the physical to data, technology, and automation. And then John Shoop is the Vice President of the Go-to-Market at OpenText, where he is responsible for the marketing plans and programs that support OpenText's private and public cloud offerings. John joined OpenText in 2008, and since then he has worked in a number of different cloud-related functions at OpenText, including the cloud delivery, cloud service delivery, solution sales, and bid management. So right now, I am going to turn things over to Peggy Winton to begin the talk today, because I know she has a great introduction planned up for you. Peggy?
Thanks, Teresa, and welcome, John. So glad that you're joining me today, and I echo Teresa's thanks to all of you who are taking time out of your day to be with us. Many of you have probably heard the term cloud first. Do you even know what that means? And if so, do you buy into that philosophy, or do you perhaps have some hesitations? Now, many of our community members are line of business owners on the front lines of customer experience. Do you even think about the cloud in your everyday? You may have demands on it, but do you even think about it and the decision points there for your business? You may be an IT professional. Are you finding yourself under increasing pressure to develop and or execute a cloud strategy? Well, no matter what role you play in your organization, John and I are here today to give you a baseline set of considerations for cloud content services. And let me do a spoiler alert right now. There is no one size fits all. So that's really why we're here today. And hopefully, with this set of decision points, you can determine the approach that's ideal for you and for your organization. Over the past 3 years, we at AIIM have talked a lot about digital transformation, and I know you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, I never want to hear that term again. Obviously, digital transformation means a whole lot of different things to different people, and maybe it's come to mean nothing to you because of that. But we're very proud of our work on looking at organizations of any size and in any industry. And we set about to define digital transformation in information-driven terms. After all, that's the currency AIIM has been dealing with for many, many years. And we like to think that information is the oil for your digital transformation journey. It's the petrol or your gasoline. And our community really seems to like that. And we have a whole set of those definitions, and that's how we've mapped our intelligent information management strategy to that. But as organizations are now beginning their digital transformation efforts, they're really focusing on three key areas for operationalizing all of that organizational content and information. The first is looking at IT processes and trying to modernize their infrastructure or ecosystem. And 58% of you told us that you're doing that. And the key goal there is to provide more business agility. There's also a need for information governance. We know the pressure to protect our customer data, to protect our intellectual property, to make sure that our key information assets have some adult supervision. 42% of you want to make those assets more findable, accurate, and accessible to machines for machine learning and really heavy lifting when it comes to some of our automation. And finally, there's the customer experiences piece. 39% are looking to increase value to your customers and to head off potential digital disruptions. We're not saying that these aspirations are in order of importance, but these are the ones that you've told us you're tackling first. Now, what's the common denominator here? I'd like to think that it's the cloud, that all three of these can be better achieved in leveraging the cloud in some way. So this is a great time for me to ask you, John. Obviously, you and your colleagues at OpenText talk to a lot of customers in a lot of different industries. When we look at digital transformation and true transformation leaders, there's this duality that kind of appears. One group seems to be focusing on the product or service itself that they're offering and how can it be more innovative to solve real problems. The other part of that is how do they deliver that in ways that their customers need. So in taking a customer-centric approach to products and services, are your customers finding that one of those is easiest or harder?
Thank you, Peggy. That's a great question, and it aligns really well with what we hear from customers in our own conversations, that the focus that we place on enterprise content services as a result of what we're hearing from customers really aligns well with those aspirational terms that you've defined. User experience, the need to make every solution respond to and meet the user where they are in terms of the design and the role-based interaction that user is going to have with the application is really important to customers. We hear as well the need to identify IT processes and modernize those in a way that's going to benefit the business as a key area of focus. We split that out a little bit differently in thinking about that both as the design of solutions that connect content to digital business processes and fuel those processes within a digital workplace, and then also applying intelligent automation to those processes and tasks that can benefit from that approach. We hear that come from customers a little bit differently than maybe putting all that together under one heading, but I think that maps very cleanly to that aspirational category of IT process and modernization that you call out. And then finally, information governance, of course, that's critically important, and it has many different manifestations in the enterprise: compliance, security, privacy. All of those are essential from a solution design standpoint, as you call out. And I couldn't pick one of those and say that it was harder or easier to implement from what our customers are telling us about their own challenges, but I will say that the consistent theme in all of those categories is that customer-centric design approach. And highlighting something that you called out in your introductory comments, Peggy, I think is critically important, is the cloud now simplifies whatever the design is of that solution. The delivery with the cloud, with the power of the cloud, really makes that much more streamlined, straightforward, and connective to all of those different aspects of solution design than maybe it was in the past with on-prem. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. One of our users who spoke at our conference recently said we need to design our internal processes with an external experience filter. And I love that. And I think that's what you were driving at. If customer experience is the thing from which everything flows, cloud is not just to make our internal customers happy, but to really make it easier to get our information, to get our products and services to those customers. So thank you for that. I think that's a really important point. But it's not as easy as that sounds, is it? I mean, that's the ideal. That's sort of the end game we're trying to get to. But 2 out of 3 of the organizations we talk to say that their efforts to address these problems, these efforts to modernize, are just hampered by their reliance on their mission-critical functions. Those are the ones performed by those legacy systems. And, you know, so much of the resources nowadays go to keeping lights on and keeping those legacy systems watered and fed. This translates into suboptimal productivity for knowledge workers today. 71% say that accessing content across those multiple platforms is really a major challenge, and it's really keeping them from moving ahead. So again, John, in looking at your customers, how are they approaching that particular aspect of modernization? What kind of problems are they encountering along the way? And, you know, with existing and multiple content implementations, how do they even think through that whole modernization challenge?
That's a great point. We think of that challenge as information sprawl within the enterprise. It's not just the impact of multiple legacy systems that users need to interact with, but think about over the past few years how many terrific point solutions have emerged in the SaaS landscape, where many enterprises have adopted, and you can see just a sample list here in this graphic of solutions that add capability to the enterprise in terms of accessing the SaaS functionality that solves a particular challenge, enables a particular process, content-centric process within the enterprise, but at the same time adds to that list of applications that all need to interconnect and share content in order to be truly effective. So there's this sprawl going on within the enterprise, and that's a major challenge that our customers are facing, and it's, I think, representative of that 71% of organizations that say that they're having challenges accessing content across those multiple platforms. So that's the solution. The opportunity now is for the CIO, the CTO to take charge again of the information landscape within the enterprise, control and manage that information sprawl with a modernized EIM solution. And as we talked about a minute ago, the best way to deliver that and enable connectivity between both legacy applications and the new landscape of SaaS solutions that are adding to that complexity is through an API-enabled cloud deployment of your EIM solution.
You know, somebody said to me that organizations ought to invest in the system or systems that's going to make the biggest impact on their business. And of course, today that means, you know, customer facing. And you're absolutely right about new SaaS and we call it best of breed solutions to really drive that aspect of your business, and getting those to talk to you know, some of those mission critical legacy systems is certainly a challenge. It's not a question of content management systems. I guess the good news for many organizations is with content services, it's easier than ever to deploy those content management systems. But there's also bad news because there's really no end to the balkanization of content capabilities. You know, a decade ago, organizations could speculate about having one content repository to meet all needs. But the reality is that this has kind of been a pipe dream. It's sort of a false hope. When we looked at our organizations in our space, not surprisingly, nearly 40% of them have 5 or more major content management systems, 5 or more, and they actually expect that to grow. Only 14% of the organizations believe that they'll have fewer content platforms to manage in 2 years, and 48% believe that they will continue to grow. Why that, John? To what do you attribute that continued growth when there are SaaS models out there?
So we're seeing exactly that same phenomena. That the situation 10 years ago, as you pointed out, was really the on-prem enterprise content management footprint that you see there on the left-hand bottom corner of this slide. But since then, over that time, we've added to that in many ways within the enterprise. We have our SAP ERM systems integrated now with our enterprise content management footprint. We've got the SaaS best-of-breed applications that you were just mentioning, Peggy, like Workday or SuccessFactors for your HR needs. We've got archiving solutions running in the cloud or on-prem. At this point, just about every function that's in support of content-centric activities, knowledge worker activities, processes, and workflows within the organization has some kind of cloud footprint attached to it. So we're already there in terms of the hybrid world. It's here now. Our own stats tell us, and the conversations that we have with customers confirm that 94% of enterprises are already using a cloud service of some kind. So as you say, it's a false hope to think there's going to be one solution that solves all of these challenges and that can address all of the enterprise information management needs of an enterprise, but the connectivity, the ability to operate solutions both on-prem and connect those to these different content-centric applications operating in the cloud continues to be the way forward in terms of optimizing efficiency and delivering benefits around these solutions within the enterprise. So the reason why we've left some blank space, some white space there at the right-hand corner of our cloud graphic is to indicate this is where it's going to continue to grow. If we come back a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, there will be other bubbles there that we can fill in and say this hybrid landscape is continuing to build out, and the need to support intelligent connectivity, information-based, content-centric connectivity between these different applications is just going to grow over time.
I like that. Watch this white space, huh?
Absolutely.
Along that line, when you look at the sort of power and the value nuggets that exist in all of these applications of ours, a good 54% of the content that our users are considering pretty important don't even live in what would be considered a content management system. They're in all those other systems. So integrating the content capabilities beyond those initial process in which, ECM was deployed is really difficult. I see that even within AIIM, a small organization, some of the investment we've made recently on some applications that are really taking our business to a different level. That's where the most important content we regard lives, not in what we would have considered a dedicated content management system. And so we really need to reconcile that and rationalize it. I think that translates into a whole set of business problems that can be addressed with a content migration strategy. That's part of that whole modernization. And that's moving information from one place to another, or a content integration strategy. You mentioned that, John, establishing a platform to access and manage content no matter where it lives, no matter the format. And we asked organizations, where are you migrating from? And you can see by the orange bar, it's sort of the dreaded shared drives. And, maybe a lot of organizations think, where do we start? Well, that's a good place. I'm proud to say at AIIM that we don't even have information on local networks anymore. We don't have those. So the dreaded shared drive is really a good place to start. And when we asked our community where they're migrating their information to, the majority said the cloud, either cloud-based content services platforms or cloud-based workspaces. So it's here. It's a reality. But a good number are still focused on migrating content into on-premises ECM systems or dedicated content systems. And I thought that last data point was kind of interesting, John. Do you think it reflects sort of a long tail effect, particularly among, let's say, small to medium-sized organizations that are only just beginning to get their unstructured content house in order? Or is it just simply due to the growing volume of information overall? What are you seeing?
I think it could be both of those things and other reasons as well. As you said in your intro, there's really no one right answer to defining your enterprise content services approach or strategy. And we're trying to meet customers where they are in that analysis and help provide them with insight and direction and guidance around which approach to moving to the cloud makes the most sense for them. And as you just point out, interestingly, there's a measurable, substantial group of enterprises out there, or customers, I should say more generally, because they're not all large enterprises, that have decided for whatever reason their particular strategy direction should be back on-prem rather than to the cloud. Now, that's a small minority of the customers that we talk to, but as your stats indicate, that's definitely a reality out there. And so we've defined really 5 patterns of cloud adoption that we're helping our customers see and understand, with the idea that if you know where you are today and where you want to go, that journey is going to be much more easy to undertake. And that first pattern is what we call off-cloud, but is really what you described as on-premise, customers that are wanting to concentrate or consolidate certain aspects of their content services strategy on-prem. That's totally legitimate, and there are approaches, tools, and products and services that will help you be successful in that pattern of adoption. But if you're looking, like most of those surveyed customers that you just referenced are, to move to the cloud, you've got more choices now than you did just a few years ago. You can adopt what we call pattern 2, which is take your own solution to the cloud of your choice and manage that yourself with help from a multiple list of vendors who are going to be involved in providing infrastructure and support services to you. That's certainly a legitimate approach as well. It's got its advantages and drawbacks, but it's not the only way that you can take your strategy to the cloud. Pattern 3 that we've identified with talking with customers is really about taking OpenText software, wrapping that in a managed service, and being able to operate that on the cloud of your choice as a customer, whether that's the OpenText Cloud or it's AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud Platform. Pattern 4 is part of that modernization story that we talked about a few minutes ago, where we're moving from VM-based applications, taking advantage of the benefits of containerization, that kind of next wave of automation and efficiency that's going to be possible with containerized application architectures, consolidating responsibility for operating a solution, containerized solution in the cloud of your choice with a single managed service provider, so that there's unity in terms of support, responsibility for delivering the customer experience that you're looking for with that solution. And then finally, a completely SaaS-based EIM, information management as a service application platform, where you are self-provisioning, self-managing, doing a lot of those kinds of things that you would need to rely on IT support internally if you were on-premise, or your managed services provider if you're running in the cloud, to do for you will be automated on that SaaS platform. And you mentioned small and medium-sized businesses as having a particular direction in their journey to the cloud. We're seeing that some of those businesses, younger businesses sometimes, are jumping straight to that EIM as a service model as the platform option of choice, or the cloud delivery model of choice, rather than going through some of those other patterns building up to that move to EIM as a service. So the bottom line is no outcome is the perfect one. They all have benefits, pros and cons, that can map to the needs of a particular business, and it's great to be able to talk with customers about that journey and help direct them to the one that's going to best meet their requirements going forward. Thanks, Peggy.
I would suggest folks really pay attention to this slide. I think this is a great resource, John. I'm reminded of, Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, and that bell curve of adoption and integration. That we could just start from scratch, or, coming into it sort of post-chasm and take advantage of some of these newer, easier deployed models. But as you say, the reality is that no, we're not going to just rip and replace. For a lot of us, we just build on what we have. This is a great way for our listeners to kind of see where they are on this. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's just make sure that we at least give cloud benefits some attention here. The fact is that in just 3 years, we've moved beyond what I would call the cloud tipping point, even for organizations that were initially skeptical. For, over 8 and 10 organizations, cloud capabilities are now viewed as a key part of the solution. So it's not really a question of if, but when. And these organizations are starting to recognize that regardless of which of those patterns John's just described is right for you, you need to view cloud as not just about storage and cost savings and mobile access and flexibility. Deploying content services in the cloud really finally represents us all with a unique opportunity to just rethink and reconfigure how business processes can evolve. That just has that potential to enhance personal productivity, overall organizational efficiency with some governance built in, and just delight our customers. It's hard to argue with content services in the cloud being the next logical step forward for digital transformation. John, the desire for more modular content capabilities that are surfaceable in context within multiple business processes is at the whole core of what content services is all about, and all of our evolution now from traditional ECM to content services. And that's certainly something that OpenText has been espousing for a while. So can you give us a good description? What do you all mean when you say content in context? And give us an example of what that looks like.
Certainly, and I love that term that you use, surfaceable, and it puts me in mind of a metaphor analogy here in this diagram, where you have this deep well of business information in the enterprise, and the way to bring value to that information is to surface it in context, to bring that from the bottom of that deep well, that piece of information that's going to be required by a user to accomplish a particular task at the moment that it's needed, in the context that it's required, in the format that's usable, with the permissions and the governance associated with it that's going to make it useful to that user. That's really what we mean about content in context, and enabling that through any-to-any integration of the different use cases and applications that require that content in the enterprise, and again, making it available at the right time in the right format to the right user to action. And you can imagine so many different scenarios within your particular organization, I'm sure, where that's important. Your interactions with externally with partners and customers, the information that you obtain and share with them, then having a repository within your organization in a leading application, or even on-prem in a hybrid model where you've retained repositories or ECM solutions that are going to house that information. Again, surfacing that specific content and putting it in the hands of the user that needs it at the moment and in the right format that it's required is really what that's all about. In a cloud-based delivery option for enterprise information management really makes that any-to-any integration possible. Thank you.
And I guess it makes it seamless, and that's what we're striving for. I know a few people use, swivel chair analogy, and you want to avoid that. You don't want our workers to have to stop what they're doing and sort of invoke something else. And I think the seamless aspect is really the thing we're striving for here. But it's not easy, according to most of you. And it may not be for every process or every department or every organization. A good 50%, actually over that, said that this is a problem for you. It's a problem migrating your information from on-premises repositories to cloud ones. So let's take a little look at that a little bit more. Why is it a problem? Interestingly enough, people aren't as concerned about security. I love when people question, where is that cloud? But you should ask, who's responsible for protecting your information? We find that people are more fearful of losing control of those intricate processes that were initially set up on premises. That's really one of the more action preventing kind of fears that we see. There are obviously others. John, when you talk to people, what are you seeing? Is there anything that jumps out the most among your customers?
Well, we do see security and compliance as a consistent theme in talking with customers about finding their right strategy and approach to moving to the cloud. That's always going to be an important consideration in whatever choice a customer winds up making about what cloud is the right cloud for them. But you're right, Peggy, it's not the only factor. There are almost too many choices right now, and that sometimes leads to paralysis in that decision-making process. But we're there to help our customers think through those cloud deployment options and weigh the benefits and the obstacles that might be in their path for moving from where they are today to that intended destination based on their own circumstances. And that would be taking into account questions like what workloads make sense to leave where they are. To your point, the ones that have matured over many years on-prem, maybe some of those are so deeply bound into activities and processes on-prem that they shouldn't be a priority for cloud migration, while there are other much more readily transferable repositories or supporting processes that do make sense to prioritize. That's something that we often hear. There's a triaging aspect to the strategy for moving to cloud that's very important to consider and prioritize. And then figuring out exactly which cloud deployment option among the many that are available to you as a customer. Making that choice correctly is something that requires thought and consideration as well, because at the end of the day, it's about control. You want to pick a solution that gives you the benefits of outsourcing and turning over the operational management responsibilities of your solution to somebody that can do that and deliver to your expectations, but at the same time retain the flexibility to drive the business and innovate in a direction that's going to benefit you at the end of the day competitively and provide information advantage to you as a result of the investment that you've made in that solution. So there's no single path to follow. There's no wrong answer, and it's just important to think through and ask yourself those questions and be comfortable in the answers before you decide which path is right for you.
That's good advice. That really is, because we can say it doesn't matter, but organizations have to do a lot of reflection there. You know, I laugh. You mentioned the word control, and thanks for that perfect segue into this slide. But my gosh, Teresa can probably vouch for this. Probably almost 10 years ago, we did a webinar on access versus control as the cloud was emerging. I mean, I think that's always been the dance or the consideration that organizations are struggling with. One of our members of our community, Kim Bartlett from White Castle, the hamburger people, said, as a line of business owner, she said, at the cloud, I don't care if it's in the cloud. I just want access to what I need when I need it. And we're also finding that workers want the experience and UI, the user experience, to be the same, whether they're out in the field or they're sort of back in the mothership. They want to just work remotely with that same feel across both on-premises and cloud. But even when organizations have contracts with cloud-only vendors, many still feel they have to keep highly confidential and or highly regulated content in their own data centers. That's real. What would be some cases, John? Give me some examples, if you would, of when that is the case, that might be the case among some of your clients. What kind of information, what kind of industries? Can you give us a few?
Absolutely, and that is a topic that comes up often in our discussions with customers about their content services migration strategy. I can give you a very recent example. I can't name the customer specifically, but it's an insurance company in Canada. It's a regulated industry, obviously, and they have a requirement from their regulator to be able to very quickly produce information on request from the regulator. And to the extent that responsiveness requires them to maintain local copies of that content. So to your point in asking the question about examples of where data needs to reside in the local data center, that's a really real example of that, where from a regulatory perspective, even though some content, some processes can be moved to the cloud, outsourced to the cloud, there's a hard and fast requirement to maintain some data in response to regulator requests locally. And to be compliant, we have to work with that customer to come up with a hybrid option where that requirement can be met. At the same time, they can take advantage of some of the benefits of cloud deployment for other parts of their application and data set. It really comes down to analyzing and understanding the use case and the business requirements that are driving that. So going back to that patterns of cloud adoption slide and kind of overlaying a little bit of a different view on it, what's really important is to think through those kinds of hard and fast business requirements, like if there is content that needs to be maintained on-prem, where does that put you in terms of these spectrum of options around customization, security, and flexibility on the one hand, and the ability to standardize and localize your deployment on the other. So we've come up with, again, some framing devices to help customers think through their own situation, their own requirements, and place themselves on that continuum in terms of staying on-prem or at the other end moving completely to EIM as a service and deciding based on the specifics of those use cases where they fit most comfortably at this point in their own evolution, and those outside factors like regulatory requirements that might be driving some of the decision process. So again, no one answer, no single path, but a careful consideration of your use case requirements and the external factors that you're operating under as a business, like the regulatory framework, I think will lead you to a good outcome every time. Peggy?
Thanks, and I think I got ahead of myself here, and I want to go back to that slide we had showing, so you go into some detail there. I think one clarification point is that when you consider a move to the cloud, it's not just porting over on-premises systems and applications to the cloud. That's what is called lift and shift. There's a big difference between doing that and using cloud-native applications that were designed for that environment. I liken it to taking an analog document and putting it on the web. It won't be optimized for responsive design to view on multiple devices. Now, most of us are using some kind of simple file sync and share for some of the day-to-day document access and teamwork, and that's not a bad place to start. Again, getting rid of those shared drives. But if we're designing internal processes for external experiences, there are so many more ways to extend the cloud to involve our customers and really leverage those apps. I think another kind of reality check is that cloud doesn't necessarily equal free or cheaper. What tips do you give, John? And I think that's where you went into some detail on the slide. What tips would you give to customers when they consider things like pricing, cloud operations, the user experiences, location, anything that affects whether this is a good move or not for certain kinds of content and applications?
Thanks, Peggy. And I think it was me that jumped ahead a little bit, so thank you for bringing me back to that point where we can talk about and analyzing those different use cases and making the cloud destination decision that's right for you based on those different considerations. There's not one answer, not one right outcome, but taking into consideration what you're trying to accomplish and the options that are available to you for how to deploy and consume that application, access that data, I think are all important considerations to weigh. I really like how you call out lift and shift as maybe not the way to frame your thinking when you consider those options. We like to talk about migrate and modernize instead of lift and shift, right? That gives you the idea that there's a benefit to be gained here when you undertake that transformation to move from on-prem to a cloud-based deployment scenario, that you can benefit from modernizing the features that are available to your users in that migration process. You can eliminate maybe functionality that's no longer required by the business as part of that modernization process, and you can choose to extend the capability of your existing environment with external file sync and share, like you mentioned as an example, as part of that migration and modernization process that accompanies transformation to the cloud. So lots of different considerations to keep in mind there. And pricing, as you asked about specifically, is going to flow from how you decide to configure and prioritize what moves to the cloud and which of those features you're going to modernize.
Yeah, thank you. And, our friend Alan Pell-Sharp from Deep Analysis talks a lot and has recently published some thoughts on the cloud. And, he would say it's just not realistic to assume that organizations are going to wholly replace their current in-house content repositories overnight with a cloud-only approach. So, that's okay. And as you've said since the beginning, John, it is a hybrid world for many of us. And it just goes back to our customer experience, both internal users and external. We want people to work the same way, whether they're out in the field or back inside the firewall on the mothership. We want our customers to be able to fully appreciate our services and our products that we have to offer. John, OpenText offers a fully enabled cloud content management solution, but you also work with organizations to accommodate that on-premises and off-premises reality with both private and public cloud options. So what does that look like in, I hate to say an architecture stack, but what might it look like for some of your customer types based on activity or industry?
That's a great question. It gives me an opportunity to talk about a specific customer, which we love to do. In this case, Pacific Life, I think, illustrates a customer journey that includes all of the different scenarios that we've talked about. They operated an OpenText Enterprise Content Management application on-premise for a couple of their business units, separate implementations for a couple of their business units for many years. One business unit recently adopted a cloud-first strategy that enabled them to migrate and modernize that solution in a transition from their on-prem deployment to the OpenText private cloud. That wasn't the only cloud destination option available to them. They also reviewed and considered the benefits of a public cloud deployment for that application and decided at the end of the day, because of compliance and security and control criteria, some of the things that we talked about as decision factors a few minutes ago, that the OpenText private cloud was the best deployment option for them. They've successfully migrated and modernized that application by not just moving it to the OpenText private cloud, but now extending it with the core share, external file sync and share capability from OpenText. So this is a great example at Pacific Life of all of those different paths converging in a single organization. One of their ECM repositories continues to run on-prem. Another line of business has migrated that application to the private cloud, and now they've extended that with an EIM as a service capability, modernized that implementation with external file sync and share in the cloud. So just one customer living all of those different journeys and experiences in terms of cloud strategy all at once, which is really exciting. I invite you to follow the link there at the bottom of this slide and learn more about that with a case study. Peggy?
And that's a highly regulated industry if there was one. And, I think you've got some more information to share with folks and some more examples on this slide.
Yes, I would like to also invite you, in addition to learning more about Pacific Life and the exciting things that we're doing with them in the cloud, we also have a webinar series that I invite all of our participants to attend. You can click on the link here in this slide that will take you to an overview of our ECM, moving ECM solutions to the cloud with our standardized Cloud Edition offerings. It's a really great recorded presentation. There's just a quick registration form that you fill out and you get instant access to view the webinar online. If you were interested in this discussion, I think that's a great follow-on for folks to check out. So please do that.
Yep, the more we can see what others have done. It may not be exactly the way your business is run, but gives you something to react and compare to. I think that's great. So here's more information about that. I know we're closely closing in on our time deadline. There's just so much to talk about. Teresa, I know we've got questions from the audience, and you'll lead us through that for the next few minutes.
Yep, I do my best to get to as many of these as we can because a lot of really good questions did come in. And so I want to start with, where was this? Oh, it moved around. This is the one. I want to start with this question here where someone was asking, what sort of archiving solutions do you have running in the cloud? They're specifically concerned with the digital preservation of content, specifically PDFs, and migrating content into the cloud. John, can you give a quick answer for that?
Absolutely. We have a number of archiving solutions that are available as cloud-delivered applications today. They support a number of different use cases, and we have integrations with leading applications like SAP that many customers find extremely valuable in terms of a benefit for cloud deployment of those solutions, being able to integrate that any-to-any connectivity that we talked about earlier in the presentation is surfaced in a really interesting way with the archiving use case. So short answer, yes, we've got a lot of different applications and cloud delivery options for archiving at OpenText, and would welcome the opportunity to talk more about that.
Okay. And another question I definitely want to get to for you, John, you had mentioned native cloud applications, and do you mean apps based in the cloud, in cloud services such as Google Cloud?
Yes, so we announced a partnership with Google Cloud, GCP, Google Cloud Platform, earlier this year that extends the availability of many of our OpenText applications in the public cloud, in the Google public cloud, in addition to what we also make available in the OpenText private cloud environment. So it's a really exciting extension of availability and cloud options for customers to now be able to deploy applications like archiving, like enterprise content management, like Documentum, in the Google Cloud in the same way and with the same level of managed service and support that's available today in the OpenText private cloud. Going forward, we're rolling out more and more applications on the OT2 EIM as a service platform. Every quarter, we're building a great critical mass of applications and services that are native SaaS, EIM as a service-focused applications running in the OpenText Cloud. It may be in the future that we'll extend availability of those EIM as a service native SaaS applications to GCP, but today we're deploying those SaaS applications specifically from the OpenText Cloud.
And just to jump in, I'll just jump in because it sounds like maybe a definition is needed. It natively utilizes services and infrastructure from cloud providers. So not just Google, but Amazon, Microsoft Azure. People are taking advantage of the fact that, those already exist and you can build on those.
Thank you for that clarification.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Peggy, I want to start this next question with you, and John, do feel free to join in with this. And it's actually a bit of a two-part question here. If someone's just starting out, do you have any doubts with moving to the cloud? But also that where do you start with migrating content into the cloud? So Peggy, can you sort of tackle that first, and John?
Yeah, you bet. And, I'll give you a two-part answer. I mentioned, file sync and share solutions that have been out there for a long time. They're very, very mature. You know that we at AIM, just live in that environment so that nobody's got content on a desktop somewhere or on a flash drive somewhere. We've emptied out those shared drives. If you simply want a cloud-based place for, document control and versioning and sharing, there are lots of solutions out there. And that's not a bad place to start to just get your own teams used to it. But most of those, you certainly can extend that access to members of your supply chain and value chain that are outside of your firewall. Those are very user-friendly, and it just gets a mindset and people used to doing that. My second answer is a broader one, and I think this applies to almost any kind of change, particularly where processes are concerned. Start with something that is important but doable. It shouldn't be trivial from a business process perspective, but it should be something that is realistic. And then build on from there. I think we give that advice to be iterative and start small.
Yeah, I'll tack on to that and just say that, yes, absolutely, that's a great answer. I think that prioritizing the workload migration strategy is really what it's all about. And Peggy was spot on saying that it needs to be impactful and achievable. That just seems like a logical place to start. You want to have high confidence that moving to the cloud with that workload is going to deliver the benefit that you expect, and that users are going to see that and appreciate that, and it's going to drive momentum within the organization to continue that cloud strategy forward. But start with something that's achievable and impactful, and incrementally build on that would be the same advice I would offer.
Since we're getting close to the end of our time here, let me I want to share this out with everyone about some training opportunities that AIM always has available for you. We do offer live instructor-led training as well as online self-paced classes on a variety of different topics. And we can even arrange for a trainer to come to your place of business to provide a custom perspective of our instructor-led programs. We also have our Certified Information Professional certification, and that is dedicated to enhancing and promoting the profession of information management. And we also have a class called the Fundamentals of Intelligent Information Management. And this was recently revised this calendar year, and had the pleasure of reading through a lot of that material, and it's really good stuff. And it's not only very helpful to overview of all things intelligent information management, but it's an excellent review to prepare for that CIP exam. So all information on all of this fun stuff can be found at aim.org/training. So I encourage you to check that out. And since we are at the end of our webinar time, we have been recording this webinar, and I will be emailing the link out to everyone, so you can come back, catch listen to this again, invite your colleagues to listen to it. Do download the resources. Please take the feedback survey. And I very much want to thank our underwriter, OpenText. Without the support from our solution providers, AIIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinar series. So thank you very much for your sponsorship, OpenText. It is greatly appreciated. And as we bring our webinar to a close, I want to leave everyone with our speakers' closing thoughts today. And I'm going to start first with Peggy Winton from AIIM, your key takeaways.
Well, thanks. And I just want to assure that those of you who submitted questions we didn't get to, we will definitely answer those. John and his team would be delighted after this to send you a private message, so don't hesitate. And there were some great questions about getting folks off of the dreaded shared drive, so we want to answer that one. I am going to suggest, and I'm going to push this slide back out, I think using this particular slide that John shared with us is a really good place to just review and think of your own organization here. While it kind of presents almost the end state, I think it really gives people a good approach. What pattern do you fall in, or what pattern are you comfortable with? I really like this slide, John, so thank you.
And John Shoup from OpenText, your closing thoughts today.
Well, first, let me just say thank you very much to Peggy, Teresa, and AIIM for the opportunity to talk with you today. This was a really interesting conversation from my perspective. All of the stats that you presented, Peggy, really align well with our own learnings from customers in terms of priorities, expectations, and the things that we're all aspiring to do together in the cloud. So it was a really interesting and validating discussion from that perspective. And I would also highlight that same slide, Peggy, that you chose to focus on here a minute ago. You started out the presentation by saying there's no one size fits all, and I couldn't agree more with that. This wasn't meant to be a prescriptive, this is what you must do to be successful kind of conversation. It was really meant to say that there are many paths to the cloud, and it's important to think through and choose the one that's going to benefit your business the most. And hopefully what we shared today will at least shine a light on the possibilities, if not point to the one that's exactly right for you. Thank you.
Don't be afraid.
And thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. Have a great day.